Good morning from the yard of trucks. Welcome back. If you're watching this, you may have already seen a couple of the videos that I put out before dealing with these trucks. I recently shared a video where I sort of half rebuilt and then swapped a carb onto the brown truck, and it helped a lot, runs better. I decided to go ahead and just do the same thing with the second carburetor from the other truck and just put it back on. So basically, essentially just switching the carbs from one truck to the other, but trying to clean them both out and see if they could both run possibly. There's no real reason to do this for the second one because the second truck, which is behind me here, still is not roadworthy no matter what. It obviously, if you look in there, you can tell it needs a fuel system. Needs to actually have something plumbed. There's no functional hard line from the tank to the carb right now, so that's going to need to get dealt with. This truck also doesn't have brakes right now, so there's some stuff to do, but in the meantime, I just thought I'd give it a shot and see if I could make it run, and then we'll move on from there. Really quickly, before we get to the truck and the carburetor, this is for my friend Corey. We got together the other day and we were talking about life and trucks and cars and, you know, just things in general, and somehow we got talking about music, and I was mentioning my my old band Electric Cheese and how our first album was called Keep On Truckin'. When I say band, you understand this is not a serious endeavor. This is something that my friend Pete and I put together when we were 14 years old, and then we made a few quote unquote albums on cassette off and on over the years just for fun. But the first one was called Keep On Truckin', and that came up in conversation the other day for obvious reasons. So I just wanted to show this here for Corey. And by the way, while we're talking about Corey, if you're into this kind of content, cars and trucks and whatnot, you need to join me in encouraging my friend Corey to get his own channel started up, because he's got something that's really cool. He has a third gen Trans Am GTA Notchback. And if you don't really know what a Trans Am GTA Notchback is, take a minute and Google that, because it's a very cool, very unusual, very rare vehicle. And Corey has one that's been in his family. His dad bought it new. It's in amazingly good mint condition. Really cool car. And again, the notchback thing is what makes it interesting. I won't go in depth about that right here today, but I'm hoping that Corey takes this as a little nudge to get his channel started, because I want to see some notchback content on YouTube. So more on that later. So I have mentioned before that if you're watching this channel at all and watching what I do, I want to be super clear all the time that this is not intended to be an expert how-to channel. I'm just documenting things that I do. I am not a professional mechanic. I'm barely an amateur mechanic, but I like figuring things out. I like playing around with cars. So I'm going to show you how I cobbled together a temporary fuel system here. Obviously, we've got the gas can with the hose. The pump on this engine is working great. The factory mechanical fuel pump is excellent. Pumps real good. So we've got that pump drawing fuel from this gas can and then feeding it to the carburetor. So there's a factory hard line here going from the pump up to the carburetor. When I got this truck, it already had this aftermarket filter in line here. That filter seems to be clear. There's no blockage there. The blockage on this fuel system is in the line that goes from the tank to the pump, so that's why we have the gas can over here instead. But in order to make this work, when I swapped these carburetors out before, the fitting, the inlet on the carburetor was completely chewed up, and not by me. It had been chewed up by someone previously, so it was impossible to get this line out of the larger fitting there without literally destroying that. And apparently I discovered that it's also difficult to find a factory hard line to replace this piece here that goes all the way to the carburetor. Probably could come up with one if I really tried, but I'm not really trying to spend a lot of money on this right now, since this isn't a roadworthy project anyway. So as you can see, what I did is I really pieced something together here. What we've got is a junction in the middle here that I got at the local hardware store. We have an excellent hardware store here in town. That's essentially a reducer. It's changing that from a 3/8 to a 5/16 line so that I could make it run from what I already had, which was 3/8, to the fitting that I got for the carb, which is 5/16. I may have said that backwards, but you get the idea. And this, I had to piece this together too. This is actually a Holley fitting. I could not find the right piece for this Rochester monojet, but I found a Holley fitting that had the right size and the right thread on there. And then it's just some hose and some clamps and some, you know, thread tape and all that. It doesn't look great, but it works, and I tested that out already. Spoiler alert, I have messed with this just a little bit. I did try cranking it to make sure there were no leaks in that system, and it seems like we're good there. So I'm going to give it a shot again and just see if I can get this to fire up with this other carburetor on here. Again, this is the one that was originally on the brown truck, was originally on this truck over here. I took the carburetor from this truck and cleaned it up and put it on this truck, and it made that truck run much better. So now this is the process in reverse. Now we took the bad carburetor, or the worst carburetor, and did the same basic sort of clean out, not a full rebuild, and then bolted it back on here. And we're just gonna see if we can make this run. This engine did run pretty well before with the other carburetor on it, so there shouldn't be any major issues here, but let's see what happens. I do want to point out one other thing. I told you this is not a how-to channel. You should not take my advice on any of this stuff, but one thing that I will tell you that you should take my advice on is if you're ever going to mess around with fuel systems, with anything that involves spark fuel, anything like that, especially on an older vehicle like this where you're putting things together in a way where you know you could potentially have leaks or whatever, you should not do so without a fire extinguisher handy. Thankfully, I have not had to use this on any of my projects yet, but I always keep it nearby when I'm playing around with stuff like this. You know, like I said, I'm not an expert, but even if you are, people can make dumb little mistakes, or there can be things that you're just not aware of that can cause a spark to get where there's gasoline, that can cause a fire, and that could, you know, obviously do minor damage, or it could burn down your whole vehicle, and nobody wants that. So go spend a few bucks. You can get a nice little fire extinguisher, brand new, super cheap. Go to Harbor Freight, go to, you know, your local Farm and Fleet, whatever. Grab yourself an extinguisher, just keep it in your vehicle, and that way when you're working on it, it's always nearby. And by the way, this message is brought to you by the latest video from Dave Chappelle. Was just watching his new Ford project and how it almost burned down on the side of the road, and it just reminded me that I should point that out. Okay, so I hooked the battery back up, which was disconnected. I leave it disconnected usually when I'm not doing anything with this truck. Hook that back up. Like I said, the fuel system I know is pumping just fine. I just primed the carburetor with a little splash in there. I'm going to turn the key and let's see what happens. Okay, so that's failed attempt number one. Here goes attempt number two. Okay, I have thoughts. So I mentioned before that I had done a little bit of work off camera. I know for a fact that my fuel system is pumping just fine. I took the line off after the filter over here, after I tried cranking this the first time and just to see if it was pumping. No problem. I got a good supply of fuel. I also, before that second attempt there, I put a pretty good splash of gas down the throat of the carburetor, which definitely should have been enough for it to bark off once or twice at least, even if it wasn't going to want to run consistently. And if you listen to that last clip, or either one of those, you noticed that it was cranking and not attempting to fire at all. So because of that, I'm thinking we may have an issue with something else like spark here. And again, spoiler alert, I've done a little bit of this work already. When I first tried to do this the other day, same issue. It seemed like it didn't want to fire at all, even though there was gas in the carburetor that should have made it at least fire once or twice. So this has an HEI distributor on here. Let me flip this camera around here. We've got the standard setup with the coil and the cap of the distributor here. And like I said before, this truck was running fine before I did the carb swap onto the brown truck. So I know that, you know, the timing was set right. All of that was good. I thought another thing that I could do just to test real quick if it acted like it wasn't getting spark was to pop the cap off there and test that coil. And so I did that already. I got out my multimeter and that coil tests fine. So I don't think that's the problem, but I still at this point would think that perhaps one way or another spark seems to be an issue. So that's going to require a little bit more work, and I thought that might happen. So because that's about as far as I'm going to go with this today for a couple of reasons, I thought I'd just show you one other thing. This video is kind of random. We're doing a few different things. We're talking about my old band, we're talking about fire extinguishers and safety, and now we're going to talk about art and paintings. I'm going to show you the latest thing that I did here. This is a nice small little 8 by 8 inch square painting that I made the other day, which is based directly on a wheel from this truck behind me with the wheel cover on. Now here's some interesting Chevy truck trivia, which I learned after I started getting more into square bodies. When I picked up the brown truck, it had these wheel covers on it. I later discovered, and I think this is correct, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that these wheel covers are actually not correct for an early square body. Those would be, these wheel covers would be correct for the previous generation of trucks from Chevy, the 67 to 72s. So there's the painting sitting on the hood of the truck that was wearing those caps when I first got it. Those caps are now on the gray truck. But like I said, I'm fairly confident that these wheel covers are actually originally from the previous generation, from a 67 to 72. They wouldn't be accurate for either of these trucks, but they do look good on those wheels. I have a correct set of caps for this truck. They're not on there right now because I also like the look of the wheels without caps. But anyway, since this video is just sort of a collection of random things, thought I'd go ahead and show you this nice little painting here too, because I'm pretty happy with it. So it's late September, almost basically early October here in the Midwest, and it got to 87 degrees yesterday. So that's why I'm out here in the morning, just doing a few random things before it heats up again. So we're gonna stop that part of the video for now, and I'm gonna go inside and work on other things. But I will update you as soon as I start to dig in and diagnose what is actually keeping this truck from running. See you soon. Okay, hang on, I decided to show you one more thing on this video. We've talked before on a previous video about how my long-term plan for the brown truck is to swap a 6-liter and a 4L80 into it. And so the other day, I picked these up off Marketplace, which are gonna help me out with that plan. This is a transmission crossmember and a pair of Dirty Dingo adjustable engine mounts that are made to fit an LS platform engine and transmission into that truck. So, just thought I'd update you on the long-term plan there. We're collecting parts, and eventually we'll get to that, which is gonna be fun.